Okay, so today's lecture is also very important because today we will be looking, as I was telling you, at policies that one can implement to steer the economy one way or the other. So the main policy tools are monetary policy and fiscal policy, and we'll be looking at the way they work and what are the interactions between fiscal policy and monetary policy. And then, of course, the ISLM model can also be affected by other external shocks. We will also look at that as well. So that will be a kind of short-run analysis. That's what happens when the time horizon is fairly limited. Then we will extend our time horizon and look at the adjustment from the short run to the long run, when we have a longer time horizon. And also we'll give a couple of examples, monetary expansion and an adverse supply shock in that sense. And then finally we'll do another very important thing, which is derive the aggregate demand curve. And then see how our policy tools, monetary policy and fiscal policy, will affect the aggregate demand curve. So let's get going. Okay, first of all, just a piece of jargon. When we talk about monetary contraction or tightening, that means we are referring to a decrease in money supply. On the other hand, of course, if we are talking about monetary expansion, that's an increase in money supply. Okay? Now, all this monetary tightening and monetary expansion will not affect the IS curve, only the LM curve. So any monetary policy measure will only shift the LM curve, not the IS curve. Okay? Keep this in mind. Okay, so let's see how it would work. So basically, when you are putting, the ISLM model on a piece of paper, on a graph, that means you are looking at two main equalities. One is for the IS, which is the equilibrium in the goods markets, which means that Y output is equal to planned expenditure, C plus I plus G. And the other is equilibrium in the, and that's the IS curve. The second one is the equilibrium in the financial markets, monetary and non-monetary, which is reflected in the equality money supply equal money demand, which is a function of interest rates and output. Okay? Okay. So given this ISLM model, let's study first fiscal policy in terms of moving government expenditures or taxes, and then monetary policy, moving money supply. Actually, let's start with monetary policy. Let's consider an increase in money supply. Okay? So here, you will say, but we have seen what happens last time. We saw that an increase in money supply shifts the LM curve, etc. But here now we are considering both markets, the goods markets and the financial markets, and we will see that there is an interaction going on between them. So this is an important aspect you should focus on now. So if you start from this situation with an equilibrium pair, equilibrium output Y1 and interest rate R1, and then increase money supply, then the LM curve will shift to the right. Okay? When the LM curve shifts to the right, the immediate effect of that is a drop down in the interest rate, all the way here. Okay? For a given situation in the IS market. But of course, this drop in the interest rate means higher investment. That's the interaction with the goods market. So higher investment means higher income. Now going back to the money market, higher income means higher money demand. And higher money demand means that we move back along the LM curve and reach this point here on the IS curve. So at the end, so let me recap. We have an initial drop in interest rates, which increases investment, increases income. The increase in income means higher money demand. Because of higher money demand, the interest rate climbs back a little, but not all the way. So we have at the end, we have a drop in interest rate, but not as large as we would have had without the interaction with the goods market, and an increase in income. Okay? Because of the increase in income, the drop in interest rate is somewhat contained, because we have a higher level of investment. Sorry, with the increase in income, we have higher money demand, which contains the drop in interest rate. Okay? So, is this clear? Did you follow? We go once again. Increase in M shifts the LM curve, drop in interest rate, increase in investment, increase in income, increase in money demand. The interest rate rises a bit, and so we have in the end both higher income and a drop in interest rate. Okay? That's the effect of an expansionary monetary policy. An expansionary monetary policy results in lower interest rate and higher income. And that's why it is done in the first place, to stimulate the economy, to have a higher level of income. Okay. Now, increasing government purchases. G. Yes?
Sir, last year, in the last course, we studied money neutrality, where by increasing money supply, it doesn't really change output in the short term. So how does that apply here?
No, money neutrality is not in the short run, it's in the long run. And you see, is when prices adjust, then you have money neutrality. It depends on the speed of adjustment of prices. But we will get to that. Okay, so consider now an increase in government purchases. Okay? So, as we saw last time, that will result in a shift of the IS curve. And we also saw last time that the shift can be measured and is equal to the fiscal multiplier, 1 over 1 minus marginal propensity to consume, times delta G. That's the magnitude of the shift. However, because income becomes higher by that amount, that means we have higher money demand. Here it's again the interaction between the two markets. Higher money demand in the money market, remember, means excess demand of money. So it means an upward pressure on the interest rate. So the interest rate increases, and because of the increase in interest rate, that lowers investment, and therefore the total increase in income is less than this. Okay? So the final increase in y is smaller than 1 minus 1 over 1 minus MPC times delta G. still have some increase in Y, but not as large as the size of the horizontal shift. This is sometimes known as crowding out. So the increase in the public sector, in government expenditure, can crowd out private investment. Okay. If we look at a tax cut, what is the difference compared to an increase in government expenditure? The difference is in the size of the shift. So the size now is not 1 over 1 minus MPC, but it's minus MPC over 1 minus MPC. And this is because while $1 increase in government expenditure impacts entirely, $1 cut in taxes will only impact through the decrease to the increase in consumption, which is measured by the marginal propensity to consume. Okay? So it's less, the magnitude is less than before. Question?
Yes, why is it minus MPC?
This is a tax cut. It's a reduction in taxes. So a reduction in taxes means that this comes with a negative sign. It's minus something. So when you have two minus, then you have an increase in output. You know, a tax cut also will produce an increase in output like a government expenditure increase. But to have that increase in output, you have to have two minus signs, because otherwise you will have a drop in output. And then again, once you have this increase in output, you have higher money demand, which increases the interest rate. So you will have a drop in investment and the crowding out. And so in the end, the effect will be smaller. The increase in Y will again be smaller than the increase, the horizontal increase in the IS curve. But the important point in this slide is that the increase due to delta T is smaller than the increase due to delta G, because now it only works through MPC, which is less than 1. Okay. Any question?
So how is MPC calculated?
MPC is the marginal propensity to consume. So it is assumed to be less than 1 because it's based on our daily behavior, so that when we earn any money, any dollar of income we earn, we don't spend all of it. MPC is what we spend, the consumption. So we spend partly and some we put aside. So it may be very close to 1, but it's not actually 1, because 1 would mean that we don't save anything. Can be true for some people, but in general, at macroeconomic level, we are not looking at an individual basis here, we are looking macroeconomic level. In general, we spend some and save some. Okay, if we look at the other side, so instead of a tax cut, we look at an increase in taxes. Of course, now the shift of the IS curve will be on the other side, to the left. Okay? It will be still be true that the shift, the horizontal shift is equal to MPC over 1 minus MPC times delta T. But because it is now an increase, so that minus sign in the front will mean that output will now drop. Okay? Now let's come to the interaction between monetary and fiscal policy. Or should we have a short break? Which one is? Do we go for this? Are you tired or? No? Okay, let's have this. And then we have a break. Okay. So, monetary policy and fiscal policy can also interact in the sense that seeing some fiscal policy measure, the central bank may react to that to achieve some desirable outcome. So, for example, suppose the government increases government expenditure, then there are three possible central bank responses. One is to hold money supply constant, another is to hold the interest rate constant, and the third is to hold output constant. So the effects on the economy of delta G are different in all three cases. So the first case is the one we just studied, is when the central bank does nothing. Then we have the shift in IS curve, and then we have the crowding out. So we have an increase in both output and interest rate. Okay, we just saw that. That's the first case. But now suppose that instead the central bank wants to target a particular interest rate. So following an increase in G, the central bank does not like the interest rate to go up. For example, it wants to avoid that crowding out. So it will react to an increase in G. How can it achieve a constancy of the interest rate?
By increasing money supply.
Exactly, by matching the increase in G with an increase in money supply so that the LM curve also shifts. And therefore there is, so you see when G increases, we have an increase in income which increases money demand. Now if the central bank matches that increase in money demand with an equal increase in money supply, then there will be no change in interest rate. Okay? So then the effect on output will be largest, and it will be exactly equal to that 1 over 1 minus MPC times delta G, the horizontal shift of the IS curve. Whereas there will be no change in interest rate. Okay, so that's a possible response of the central bank. Another possibility is that following the increase in G, the central bank may want to keep Y constant now. That may be the case if the central bank has a feeling that the economy is overheating. So they don't want to have inflationary pressures. Therefore, they want output to stay constant, not to increase. And in that case, it will reduce money supply. By decreasing money supply, the LM curve shifts left, and you can see output will not change, but the increase in interest rate will be maximized now, will be very large. Okay, so in each of these cases, the fiscal multiplier is different. So there are two multipliers. One is the expenditure multiplier, the other is the tax multiplier. So we have seen that the expenditure multiplier should be greater than the tax multiplier because of the difference between those two terms, 1 over 1 minus MPC versus MPC over 1 minus MPC. So because this is greater than this, that means this multiplier will be greater than this one. And this is confirmed here, you see? Now, the other important aspect is that when the central bank reacts by matching the increase in money demand due to the increase in income with an increase in money supply and tries to keep the interest rate constant, then the fiscal multiplier is also much larger. Okay, so it is 1.93 instead of 0.60 in case of G, and minus 119 instead of 0.26 in case of delta Y or delta T. These values, of course, come from simulation from a macroeconometric model. Okay. Then, of course, we can have some external shocks. So far we have been talking about intentional shocks to the economy by either monetary or fiscal measures, either increase G or taxes or money supply. But we can have shocks which are completely external, not intentionally caused by anybody. So if there is a stock market boom or crash, then there will be changes in consumption, because the stock market boom will make people richer, and the stock market crash will make them poorer. So there will be changes in wealth, which will increase consumption. And we can also think of changes in business confidence or consumer confidence. In that case, both investment and consumption will be affected. This is why there are out so many measures, indexes of consumer confidence. You know, there are many consumer confidence surveys that come out periodically, precisely to try and gauge what is the level of consumer confidence, and the same is done with respect to business confidence, so that one can understand which way the economy is going, whether there is any shock, exogenous shock going on in the economy. So anytime we talk about this, changes in C or in I, then we have shifts of the IS curve. Okay? If the shock is in the financial market, in other words, an LM shock, like, you know, a wave of credit card frauds, then the LM curve will be shifting. So in the previous slide, I gave you examples where the IS curve would shift. Here we see examples where the LM curve is shifting. For example, if you have many more ATMs, then you have less need for keeping money in your pocket. So that's an exogenous LM shock. Okay, before we go to the general equilibrium, let's have a short break, and then we start again in 5 minutes. Okay, so we have looked at the short run, right? We looked at monetary policy, fiscal policy, etc., in a fairly short time horizon. So now we want to go, so in that short, when I say in the short run, that meant we were not really concerned what was happening in the labor market, whether the labor market was in equilibrium or not. As you could see, the full employment line was not there. The only concern for us was IS curve and LM curve. Now, if we move to the longer time horizon, then we have to take into account all three markets. The goods market, the financial markets, but also the labor market. So if all three of them are in equilibrium, then we call that a general equilibrium. Except that there is no reason why all three lines should pass from that particular point E. Generally, what we have is that the goods market will be in equilibrium, then, so we will be on a point where the IS curve and the full employment line meet, okay? So we have the IS curve, we have the full employment line, but there is no reason why the LM curve should also cross at that point. If the LM curve is crossing at another point, then we have that short run situation we were just working with before the break, where these two markets are in equilibrium, but the labor market is not. So now we want to see what is the adjustment of the economy towards the general equilibrium from the short run situation. Okay, so to do that, first of all, we make a couple of assumptions. So actually we did make a couple of assumptions, even if we didn't know about it. Now I will make you aware of it. When we were looking at the economy here, it was not in general equilibrium, which means that the labor market is not in equilibrium. So the assumption we were making is actually on the next slide. The assumption we were making is that here firms were willing temporarily to produce to match whatever level of demand existed in the market. Okay, that's an assumption that is valid for the short run, where firms are temporarily willing to do that, but of course only the key word here is temporarily, because when they are doing that, they are not producing the amount they would like to, which is the full employment level of output. Okay, so in due time, over time, they will want to change that through increase in price level. So the other assumption we were making here in the short run is that the price level was fixed. All our analysis, I never mentioned prices. It was for a fixed price level. Before the break, I never mentioned prices because that was not contemplated, any change in the price level. If we change our time horizon and make it longer, then we'll have to account for changes in the price level. And that will happen because firms will, over time, will not be happy with producing more than the full employment level, so they will achieve a reduction in production by increasing prices. And of course, what will happen when they increase prices? The effect will be on the real money supply, because we know that money supply is M over P. So when prices go up, then real money supply goes down. And that means the LM curve shifts left. So this is how the economy goes back to the general equilibrium. Now, to see how that works, the textbook, one of the textbooks, Abel Bernanke and Truchot, it considers a monetary expansion. So first we start from general equilibrium situation, then we consider a monetary expansion which shifts the LM curve to the right. Okay? So at a given price level, so you notice here the price level is 100. At this given price level, money supply increases, LM curve shifts to the right. Okay. Then, and so here that assumption we were making that firms are willing to supply the amount demanded at a given price level keeps in, right? But then over time, firms will not be happy with this level of production, so they will increase prices. Prices increase, in the example here, by 10%. The LM curve shifts back to the left until we reach equilibrium level E. Okay? So here, at point F, only goods markets and financial markets were in equilibrium. Labor market was not in equilibrium. When we go back to point E, then again all markets will be in equilibrium. Okay? Another example of an adjustment, long run adjustment, is as a consequence of a temporary adverse supply shock. Okay, so if we start from a situation of general equilibrium, and then we have like an adverse weather event, supply shock, then so we start here. IS, LM, and full employment. Then we have a shift from here to here. That's the adverse supply shock. Okay, so once that happens, basically this is no longer relevant. So again we are back in that situation, short-run situation, with the economy where two markets are in equilibrium, but the labor market is not. So we are above full employment equilibrium. So firms will increase prices to go back. And therefore the LM curve will shift back to the left, and the economy will reach the general equilibrium. So the effect of an adverse supply shock, well, first of all, in the labor market, the reason why this line had shifted was because in the labor market we had, this is employment, this is wages. In the labor market we had, this is labor demand, and this is labor supply. We had, for example, a shift of the labor demand, and therefore we have lower wages and lower employment. So one effect of the adverse supply shock is that real wage, employment and output, they all fall. Okay? Now, looking at this graph, we see that the interest rate goes up, output falls, as we said, but because interest rate is up, that means investment is also lower. So investment and consumption, because output is lower, consumption will be lower. Interest rate is higher, so investment will also be lower. So these are all the effects stemming from adverse supply shock. Okay? Any question? Is that adjustment to the long run here clear with respect to the previous example, stemming from monetary expansion? The fact that first we move above full employment equilibrium, and then firms will rise prices, so the LM curve will shift back to the left. Yes?
So, how do we differentiate between short run and the long run? Do we look only at one market in the short run?
No, they differentiate in the sense that in the short run, there is no change in the price level. So in the short run, firms are willing to meet the increase in aggregate demand by increasing supply. So there is no change in the price level. That's the short run. So, and because of that, the economy goes above full employment level. In the long run, firms will want to achieve equilibrium in all markets, including the labor market, so they will increase prices. Or, of course, if you are on the other side, then the prices will go down. So in the long run, you will see movement in prices. In the short run, you will not. Of course, that is, we will see later, not today, depending on the assumptions you make about the speed of adjustment in prices, because there is another approach which believes that prices actually adjust immediately, instantaneously. Then you don't have any short run. Then you are always on the full employment line, if you make that assumption. And that's where your monetary neutrality comes in. Because if you are always in the full employment line, an increase in money supply will not give you an increase in output. You will immediately go back to the full employment level. But we will see that later on. Okay? For the moment, what you should know is that in the short run, prices will not change, and therefore we go above full employment, and therefore we have only two markets in equilibrium, the goods market and the financial market, but not the labor market. Okay. So now that we have also started thinking about changes in prices, let's see what is the relationship between price level and output. So by now you should have realized that the position of the LM curve on the graph, it's a function of the price level. Depending on the price level, that determines money supply, real money supply, and therefore it determines the position of the LM curve on the graph. So in order to derive the aggregate demand curve, all we need to do is to let the price change and then ask ourselves what would happen and what is the new equilibrium level of output following that, and then plot that in a graph with prices on the vertical axis and output on the horizontal axis. So that's what we do. So first we have the, familiar ISLM graph here. So we have, at a given price level, we have a given position for the LM curve. Okay, that gives a particular level of equilibrium income, Y1. And so we plot that dot here in the YP graph. Okay? Then we let the price change, increase to a higher price level. If the price becomes higher, then real money supply goes down, right? So the LM curve shifts left. That means we have a higher equilibrium interest rate, but a lower equilibrium output. So we have a second dot here. And the final step is just to connect the dots. And we have the aggregate demand curve. So the aggregate demand is an inverse relationship between prices and output. But the reason for that is very different from the micro demand that you know about. Because here, what is the reason for the inverse relationship? The chain of events, it's here. This is the chain of events. Higher prices means lower money supply, which means higher interest rate, lower investment, and lower output. In micro, why do you have, so this is why you have lower output with higher prices. In micro, why did you have lower quantity demanded with higher price?
Margin utility.
Because you have a substitution effect, right? With higher price, you move from that product to another one. You move away from that product, and therefore your quantity demanded of that product goes down. So it was a totally different reason why there is that inverse relationship. Here, it looks the same, the shape, but the chain is this. It's through money supply and interest rate and the effect on investment. Are you all following? If you're not, if you're getting lost, please stop me. I can clarify anything you are not clear about. Are you all on board? Are you on board? Okay, good. Are you on board? You have a ticket? Are you on board?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So let's say then, if we are all on board, we can say. Okay, so another way to show it's from, I mean, it's the same basically, but I just want you to be familiar also with the other graph from Abel Bernanke. So this one, previous one was from Mankiw, this one. Now this one is from Abel Bernanke, but it's the same thing. You just consider two different price levels, and therefore you have corresponding two dots and the AD curve. Okay? So now we can consider policy changes, monetary policy and fiscal policy, and what happens to the aggregate demand curve. So in terms of monetary policy, we start with the given level of money supply. Then if the central bank increases money supply to M2, then the LM curve shifts right. Okay? But notice that the price level is still the same. So with M1, we had an equilibrium level of income, Y1, at a given price level, P1. So we were here. Okay? Now when we move to M2, the LM curve shifts, but the price level is still the same. The equilibrium level of income will have changed. Now, to Y2. Okay? So, that means, that tells you that we are now on a different AD curve, because it's the same price, but different level of equilibrium income. Okay, so that's the new AD curve. So again, just like for the IS and the LM curves, the way to understand whether we are moving along the curve or we are shifting is by looking at what is changing. If the change affects one of those two variables that are on the axis, then you're moving along the curve. Here, the change affects a third thing, which is nominal money supply. Therefore, we are shifting to a new curve. Okay? And the chain of, events is here. Oops. So as you have higher money supply, you have a drop in interest rate, an increase in investment, and a higher level of output. Yes?
So can we say that monetary policy has changed the price?
Now, here, monetary policy does not change the price because we are still at the same price level. We shift to a new AD curve where at each price level, now we have a higher level of income. So monetary policy changes the equilibrium level of income at each price level. By changing, why it changes the equilibrium level of income? By changing
money supply.
Yes, money supply by changing the interest rate. Okay. Now, fiscal policy. So we are at a given level of income, again, and a given price level, P1. Now, suppose we increase G or decrease T. Okay? So, in that case, the highest curve will shift to the right. Okay? So, once that happens, again we have a higher level of equilibrium output at the same price level. At each price level, we have that higher level of equilibrium output. So, we are on a new AD curve because P is still equal to P1, but now the level of output has gone from Y1 to Y2. And therefore, we move to a second higher AD curve. So both monetary policy and fiscal policy, they would shift the AD curve. Okay? If they are expansionary, they shift the AD curve to the right. If they are contractionary, then they shift the AD curve to the left. And the same thing we can see from the graph from Ebel-Bernanke, the shift in the AD curve. Okay, so to summarize, we have seen that there is an inverse relationship between the price level and the level of equilibrium output, and that is represented through the demand curve. And any change in monetary or fiscal policy or any other variable that is not the price level will make the AD curve shift. So if we were to put all this information in a single table, here we have all the factors that can shift the AD curve, the aggregate demand curve. Can you tell me any resemblance of this table with previous tables that I have shown? Any resemblance?
So they also showed the IS curve, most of them.
This table is basically nothing else than the two tables I showed you with respect to the IS curve and the LM curve stacked up. So this is the IS and this is the, let me see.
Yeah, sir.
Yeah, this is the LM. IS, LM. Anything that shifts the IS curve, other than the price level, also shifts the AD curve. Anything that shifts the LM curve, other than the price level, also shifts the AD curve. Okay, so all the reasons here that shifted the IS curve, we know them already. Increasing wealth, expected future output, increasing G, reduction in taxes, etc. They all shift the AD curve too. Anything that shifted the LM curve, increasing money supply, expected inflation, etc., they all shift the AD curve also. Okay? Any question? No? have questions? Because I am done.